All right, a moment ago, we heard the White House defend the president's new budget plan. Now let's turn to an economist who's critical of how both the president and Republicans in Congress are dealing with the deficit. Jeffrey Sachs is the director of Columbia University's Earth Institute, which focuses on how countries can achieve sustainable development. He's also the author of The End of Poverty and Commonwealth. So thanks so much for joining us. Pleasure to have you on the program. Let me ask first for your take on the president's budget here. We haven't seen Republicans cutting that much out either, but it kind of stunned me that the president's cuts over the next decade don't even add up to the one-year budget deficit that we have this year.
Basically, we just have a slow bleed on government services that the president is recommending and the Republicans are recommending just taking off the whole limb. Both are completely unrealistic in my view. The Republicans way out of line. What they would do would be to basically destroy core government services. The president is reacting to that by doing something that just squeezes. And I find both of them very unrealistic. You know, the real story here is that in December, the Republicans and the White House agreed to give up $900 billion of revenues in the tax extensions, the extensions of the tax cuts. Then they turn around and say... You
don't subscribe to the Laffer curve, I'm getting.
You better believe I don't, because history has shown what nonsense it is. And then they turn around, having given up nearly $1 trillion of revenues over 2 years, and say, oh, my God, we have a huge deficit we have to cut. So then you cut the help for the poorest communities in this country. You cut help for clean drinking water. You cut Army Corps of Engineers, which can't build the levees to protect cities like New Orleans. And what's happening with this country? We give up massive amounts at the top in tax cuts, and then we turn around and we squeeze the poorest of the poor. We cut grants for higher education in the same month that the president tells us that's key for our competitiveness. But I don't want to attack the president because, you know, he's flanked to the right by absolutely absurd ideas that would just take apart this country.
But hang on, you think we should, though, continue then a lot of the federal spending at the levels we have it, but we need to raise taxes?
Of course. Of course. This is absurd what we're doing. The rich have had 20 years of the greatest boom in the history of this world. There's more wealth in this city than one could conceivably count. There are more billionaires. There are more people that have sheltered all their income. And we're turning around and we're just going to keep driving down the poorest of the poorest of the poor. And that's where we are. This is a game that's going to come to an end in a bad way. Do we really have to have our own Egypt here in the United States, or are we going to actually understand that we have a society where half the people have no voice in this country at all?
Professor Sachs, it sounds to me like it's politics as usual.
It is.
When do we see the politicians wake up and say, okay, we do need to raise taxes, we need to take kind of the measures that you're laying out here?
We don't, because both parties are financed by wealthy people. Both parties are gearing up for the 2012 election. President Obama has to get $1 billion in his kitty for running for re-election. The Republicans are doing the same. Everyone caters to the top. And then we hear about how hard it is at the bottom and how tough it is to cut the community development programs.
So what happens then? How does this play out? If nobody basically has the nerve, the guts to make the necessary moves, then how does this play out? Is it Egypt? Is that what we see in this country in your view?
Well, what's happening, I see it from outside because I'm constantly on the road. I'm traveling all over the world. American influence is waning. American infrastructure is deteriorating. American competitiveness is gradually declining. The president says all of these things, and he's right about it, but then he can't back up his own ideas with real money because there is no money in the account. So all that's happening is a gradual decline in the United States in power and competitiveness, in jobs for the poor, except at the top, everyone's fine because the world economy is actually booming. And if you're rich and you have a lot of money to invest, you're investing in China, you're investing in India, you're investing in other places. So our country has become two completely different countries. One is at the very top.
Truly the haves and have-nots.
Yes, and they run the politics. They finance the campaigns of both the Democrats and the Republicans. So these parties they're not quite indistinguishable, but they're both what we would normally call center-right parties. It's weird. We don't have a center-left party. We have no one talking about the poor in this country.
Especially if we lived in France. then they would be.
Well, not just France, anywhere in the world. Our politics is so odd right now because it's driven just by the top. And everyone else is wondering what's happening. Our streets aren't even being paved. We don't even have clean water anymore in our cities.
Hang on a sec.
We talk about, you say the Republicans want to cut off the limb, the Democrats are just squeezing out the blood, and I'm still shocked, maybe I haven't become as immune to the numbers yet, at a $3.7 trillion budget. I mean, it seems to me like a heck of a lot of money. And I thought that we boosted the spending to this level for emergency reasons. Now we want to freeze it at this emergency level. Doesn't it make sense to go back to a 2008 level of spending, even if you want to raise taxes at the same time?
It's actually not what's happening. If you look at these budget proposals, what's really shocking is that the so-called civilian discretionary budget under Obama's plan goes down to 2% of the gross national product. That's for education, that's for infrastructure, that's for energy, science. The whole shebang goes down by the later half of this decade under that plan to 2%. We've never seen anything like it. It's basically saying forget government other than Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, the military.
Throw those in the basket, too.
What do we do with those plans? Because they aren't discretionary. I mean, what do we do? How do we get a hold of those? Or can we?
What's happening is that serious problems in this world, like our energy instability, like the global food instability, like climate change, we don't even address in this country anymore. The Republicans systematically say that they don't even exist, those problems, and they have a reason for saying that. That's pure corporate vested interest. It's a game on their part, pure propaganda. They say that stuff doesn't even exist. We're cutting the budgets on things that are vital for our national security and our international security, like addressing climate. And the big oil, which owns the Republican Party, just keeps the propaganda up. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. So we're stuck in a real game here. I don't approve of what either party is saying. You get the point, because they're both on the take, because all of this is campaign financing games.
Professor Sachs, we only have about a minute left here. I mean, you're just back from a trip. You were over in India and elsewhere. I mean, you were talking about, you were meeting with government leaders, talking about their economies there. You know, we watched what just happened in Egypt. I mean, what is it that you think we need to kind of really understand about what's going on in our global economy here, and possibly could pertain to here as well?
World food prices are at all-time highs. There's instability all over the world. China's entering another drought. Russia had a major drought. We have the one-in-a-century typhoon in Australia. We had massive floods that haven't been seen before in Australia. We're wrecking the global climate. We've got energy crises, food crises. Do we talk about any of that in our country? Absolutely not. Our leadership, it doesn't even exist, because we're playing games on our budget. Slash the taxes, slash the budget of the poor, pretend that the real problems don't exist, and then be surprised when you get massive unrest all over the world.
Sounds like we need some lobbyists who are concerned about the environment with deep pockets.